Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here. My name is Sam Andrew. I'm the Managing Director of the DAIS Public Policy Leadership Think Tank at Toronto Metropolitan University. We're thrilled that you could join us for our next Democracy Forum, Defending Democracy in the Age of AI. Before we get started, I just want to do a brief land acknowledgement. Where we are at Toronto Metropolitan University on the territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas. It's covered by the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, Treaty 13, and Williams Treaty. We are committed to honoring our obligations to this treaty, nations, and for justice for Indigenous peoples generally. We do this as a symbolic restorative act, one among many to follow, and part of a wider and hopefully transformative reconciliation project here at TMU. I'm also now delighted to introduce our moderator for this panel, Martin Regg Cohn. Martin writes a political column for Toronto Star, focusing on Ontario politics and also international affairs. He was a foreign correspondent for 11 years and was the chief of the Middle East Asia Bureau, then foreign editor, and then world affairs columnist. He's reported for more than 40 countries and has been nominated 5 times for the National Newspaper Award. He is also a senior fellow here at the DAIS at TMU, where he has founded the Democracy Forum, which we are excited to take part in today. Take it away, Martin.
Thank you, Sam. I'm sorry. I have a bit of a talk, but hang on. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for helping me. I'm supposed to be I'm the technical person. Here you are. All right. Thank you, Sam. Bienvenue. Welcome to our 33rd Democracy Forum, where we try to do democracy differently, more democratically, and today, differently. The title, as you've heard of today's forum, is Defending Democracy in the Age of AI. It's about the 4th or 5th panel that I've done on this topic. And you would think that it would be getting easier for me and that the machine learning would make me better at this by now, but I'm still feeling my way. But I do know that the more I learn about this topic, the less that I know. So today, we're not just defending democracy. I think we're trying to talk about modern democracy. I'm going to guess that is what our guests are going to talk about. And luckily, we've got 2 great human thinkers talking about artificial intelligence and technology. They're not just thought leaders, but doers. And also human, yes, no. So let me tell you about our panelists. You have their full biographies in the program. You can look it up online, but I'm just going to have some fun with the true story, their true story. So Audrey Tang has been Taiwan's Minister of Digital Affairs since 2022 and a member of the cabinet since 2016, when she made history as the first transgender minister and perhaps the only self-described anarchist. Conservative anarchist. People already showing that anarchist behavior. She famously persuaded the government to let her write her own job description. And then she wrote an 8-year digital nation plan. And a common is usually 5-year plans. When I was growing up, we've added an extra 3. So there you are. She's a big believer in radical transparency in a democracy. She posts the transcript or minutes of all her government meetings and decisions online. To be careful what you say today. Time magazine named her one of the 100 most influential people in AI last year. And she also made the list of 100 global thinkers published by Foreign Policy magazine. And by my count, she's on close to 100 of these top 100 lists. So this is benefit. According to my research, which we will fact check momentarily when she grabs the microphone, she writes or she rewrites computer languages and she speaks foreign languages, German, English, and some French. She left school at age 14. She finished her homework and started working at age 16 in IT. Including for Apple, where she helped Siri instead of the other way around. She started early, finished early, retiring at age 33, and then decided to work for everyone in public service. She's also the child of former journalists, and I'm expecting her to answer all my questions truthfully, or she'll be in trouble with mom and dad. Welcome to Toronto Metropolitan University. By the way, was all of that true? Or because I looked it up online. So it must be true.
Some of it's true. Some of it's like me still speaking German, not so much. I used to speak German.
All right. Hillary Hartley has been since this last year, starting this last year, the chief executive officer of U.S. Digital Response, which keeps American safe in times of trouble, among other things. Before that, she was Chief Digital and Data Officer and a Deputy Minister for the Government of Ontario, which is when I first encountered her. And I feel like she, like Audrey, also wrote her own job description, being the first in that job, and we'll hear about that in a minute. Before that, she was a Presidential Innovation Fellow, and she's also worked for governments on both sides of the border, helping them figure out how to design and deliver programs and services online. And true fact, she's from Kansas. And trivia question, does anyone here know who else is from Kansas in Ontario and public life in Ontario? Answer, Mike Schreiner, leader of the Green Party. So they are, I see Kareem was about to raise his hand. Still off the mark. Welcome back to TMU. All right, the best thing about both of our guests today is that they're not just authorities, they're very accessible and accountable. So while you in the audience are picking up questions, I'm going to pick things off just to set the table for today. But my first question is actually a trick question for everybody in the audience who are listening today. And the question is, does anyone know how many active users are on Facebook today? You can't answer. Time's up. 3 billion. Okay, 3 billion. You probably know it was 500 million and about a billion a couple of years ago. There are 1.3 billion people on Instagram, also part of Meta, and TikTok, which we'll talk about later, has 1 billion true believers, including my 2 adult daughters. I'm not going to make fun of TikTok today. The power of the internet and of AI and Google and Facebook is that they scale up to unfathomable levels. And people are signing up all the time online while they are disconnecting and disengaging from democracy. So that's why we're here today. So luckily, you can both help save the world. And Audrey, I have a question, a more serious question for you. And that is, just open this up by telling us about how you got to write the job description. And that's unusual for most people who are hired by government. You don't just say, here's what I'm going to do. You're given a mandate letter. And how did your job description change over the years since you joined up? Tell us what you do.
My job description stays the same over the last 8 years. It's a very short point, so I'll just recite it as a formula of a prayer. It goes like this. When we see the internet of things, let's make it an internet of beings. When we see virtual reality, let's make it a shared reality. When we see machine learning, let's make it collaborative learning. When we see user experience, let's make it about human experience. And whenever we hear that a singularity is near, let's always remember the plurality is here. That's literally my job description. I got to write this in 2016 because during the 2014 Sunflower movement, we peacefully occupied our parliament for 3 weeks, demonstrating against the cross-strait service and trade agreements, which would make Huawei and ZTE the default for our 4G infrastructure, among other things. And so the demonstration was not violent. It's not even a protest, it's a demo, because we use civic technologies to get people's half a million people on the stream and more online consensus on these topics. And over 3 weeks of nonviolent communication and coordination, we settled on a set of very coherent demands, which was then taken up by the head of the legislature. So starting 2015, through Taiwan and China other platforms from national direction to turn digital and democracy from something that fights each other.
You said Huawei, and I should have warned you, Huawei is a trigger word. You can't use that.
Just thinking that.
Can't use that word. Tell us in that sort of poetry in motion. I thought somebody was going to applaud when they heard your words. But tell us about ground level. So you had an election, a presidential parliamentary elections in January. How did your ministry deal with, for example, the threat of cyber?
Yeah,
Very important, cyber war.
So we measure one key thing, which is effective polarization, meaning how people hate each other for party. So after the election, it's a record. Like the 3 major parties, none of which has over 51%. Now everybody feels they have one side, and they don't hate each other anymore. And then my main work leading up to the election is just to make sure that we pre-bump each and every possible information arrangement will affect us. And we know there will be TikTok videos or also Instagram videos, short videos about election counting, right? Being written, like even before those are pushed out, we know these would happen, right? So part of the work is just to invite YouTubers and really anyone with it to the public counting stations around Taiwan, because we do paper only, and the paper only ballots are counted by 3 stations, so that when the inevitable rig election short video came, we can go back and count all 3 parties YouTubers that proved that nothing like that actually ever happened. That was a defect. And so that was one of the pre-funds. And so there's many pre-funds that we could drop one deepfakes here, where I deepfake myself and showing people how easy that it is, and so on. And so pre-funking works because it's a whole party thing, right? It's not us.
In order to be effective, in order for debunking to be effective, it has to be a pre-bunk.
That's correct. So the idea is that a debunk is effective if it reaches people before the reaches, which usually means that you have to debunk in a matter of or even today's information environment. So if you know that there is going to be such, you can use those debunk videos and just use it as public.
It's really an inoculation, not a treatment after the fact, to be most effective. Hillary, you were a pioneer in Ontario as the government's first chief digital and data officer. People talk so much about the mystery of artificial intelligence. We use it as a bit of a hook title today. Everyone is talking about AI. I probably have a graph with showing it time to time series. But when you get down to it, we're appointed at 2017. We're talking about AI yet, although it hasn't existed for a long time. So what's your job description? What was your job description? Did you get to write it? And talk about how your job changed over the
well, as you mentioned, ministers given mandate letters, but I did get to work with the cabinet and with the minister at the time to carve out what we called our 10 key priorities. And those were, you could look at those today and essentially recognize the kind of work that a great digital service team needs to do. It's about creating the right teams and creating the right environment and making sure that you're grounded in, in users and user research and the us, not the, not the, an abstract solution, et cetera. So you can take a look at those today and say, we probably still need to be working on them, honestly. So I didn't get to write my job description, but I did, we were able to really kind of focus the energy. And
what if, so if you had to explain to somebody on the street or in this room or online, what were, you said there were 10 priorities. In retrospect, what are the 2 most important things you were able to deliver on?
Well, I think the 2 most important things we delivered on was the ability to bring product teams together and have a product user focus for what we're doing. A lot of times, and it's not just government that does this, but government is kind of notorious for it, writ large, not just here in Ontario. You have a problem in mind and you immediately get a solution in mind. You go and say, let's tick those boxes, let's just buy that or build that, and it'll be fine. And government has had that ability to have sort of a monopoly on this for decades. But we really are no longer in an era where if you build it, they will come, because they don't. If they can't get this done, they are going to walk up to the counter and they're going to try a different way. And so what a great digital product focus team does is follow the data and follow their users to deliver something that works, and to start small and understand what features you can add on over time to create an incredible usable service that can, that in the minds of the average person, I can whip out my phone right now, order some toilet paper, and it'll be at my house tomorrow. And people just expect things that work. And the way that you do that is to understand what people need, understand how they are interacting with things, and not just assume that what you're going to build or the solution you have in mind, we're government, they have to use it, it's going to work.
To build with the people, not just for the people.
thank you for demystifying the false god of technology and AI. At the end of the day, it is about deliverability, usability, and user. But question for both of you: can you help us reframe the technology versus democracy paradigm? So, is technology the adversary? Is it? And does democracies have to look over their shoulders, or to what extent is that just playing defense and you've got to modernize and look ahead, not look over your shoulder? Are the ones who...
But democracy is a technology. It is a social technology for collective decision making. It was just that the bit rate is very small, right? If you have 4 candidates, that's 2 bits. If you have a referendum, that's not 1 bit. The latency is very long, like 2 years or 4 years, so that each packet takes forever, right, to travel. And so that was the original idea during the Sunflower movement, was that the people already have plenty of tools for high bit rate conversations. And all we need to do is to make sure that it depolarizes people, it builds bridges across people that used to hate each other, instead of like the antisocial part of social media that does the reverse, right? So it's like just taking the reward model of the antisocial social media, flip it, and then use that social media to co-create useful policy suggestions and things like that. And so that was the original insight that led to the co-creation of the coherent demands of the Sunflower movement. And then we followed that to co-create policies for Uber, for things like that. So to your question, I think the more people contribute to democracy as a social technology, the better it gets.
You make it sound easy. Hillary, what's the reality?
I don't know about the reality, but I feel like my career and the work that I've had the privilege of being involved in, it's not necessarily about the technology around democracy, but it's about, again, if you make government simple and easy to use, you deliver information that people need, you deliver services that people need. There is a direct line from that to a resilient democracy, because you're delivering what people need, and then they have an impression in their mind that they are going to be successful. They're going to interact with the government in a new and better and simple way. They're going to tell their friends about it, but that is building trust in government. It's like, oh, they actually got this done. It works. It's beautiful. It's easy to use. I can kind of see now maybe what some of the bureaucrats are doing, or what the government is doing, and then it makes you want to get involved and have even more agency to have to participate in the direction of what the government is going to do.
So paradoxically, it's not so much that it's easy, but also transparency helps. And we used the N-word a moment ago, mandate letters. People in this audience will know there was a big controversy in Ontario about whether those mandate letters should be secret or not. And the Kathleen Wynne government released them all, and the Ford government kept them all secret. I love that word, secret. Journalists, it triggers journalists and readers. But I read the mandate letters, nobody else did, in 2017. They were really boring. Like, there was actually nothing that interesting or I shouldn't say interesting, there was nothing juicy or exciting. It was actually just about the nuts and bolts and toilet paper stuff that you're talking about. So that's an aside. Okay, Audrey, the question you're waiting for, and that is, this is like a talk show. You have a book coming out. You have a book coming out. I'm not going to show the cover. I have it somewhere, but I won't. We don't have camera 3 over there ready for my up. It's just this webcam. But you've got a book coming out that answers all of these questions. It's called Plurality: The Future of Collaborative Technology. Okay, the future of collaborative technology and democracy. We have a poster. It's very retro to have a piece of paper. In fact, it's online, and the book encourages you to download it online because there's more connectivity and hyperlinks. Spoiler alert, Audrey, tell the audience. Does it have a happy ending? Is there a false dichotomy between whether democracy contains technology or technology will trump
Technocracy, libertarianism,
that's a word, but
yeah. Okay. Yeah, so the book is on plurality.net. You can download the EPUB and PDF in both Mandarin and or English. It's Creative Commons 0, meaning that we relinquish all copyrights, meaning that if you take it and say it's your book, we won't sue you. It's completely in the public domain.
Don't try that at home.
It's co-created. And in doing the plurality book this way, what we're really trying to say is that we're not just telling, we're showing how it is actually possible to use very simple technologies like GitHub and so on to co-create policy, governance, and so on around royalties, around how books are to be translated, about endorsement rights, about who gets the final copy edited, and so on, right? So it is this microcosms of governance technologies as demonstrated by the book. And so the idea is not to prescribe any top-down like constitutional or legislative or whatever reforms, but rather to show with off-the-shelf technology today, people can already practice democracy as a high bandwidth technology. And so the main idea contained in the book is applied to, for example, counter and misinformation, counter manipulation in Taiwan, how we did contact tracing that actually worked in Taiwan during the pandemic, how we did the data coalitions around like privacy data that was kept but can be contributed in a zero knowledge way to contribute to research and all things like that that take previous polarizing dichotomies like privacy and security on one side and advancement of data on the other, and just deliver co-creative solutions as evidenced by the history of the book.
I asked you the question. I was distracted by the technology beside me because we're going to go to questions a little later on, but I already knew the answer because I've read most of the book. Not all of it. I'm not that fast a reader yet. But I have a question for you, and that is, why should we believe you? So both of you, this is a question I'm going to rope you in on this challenge. Well, both of you are prophets in your own ways. You're true believers in the power of technology. And so all of us, I think, were born when people would say that the internet, the information superhighway. Maybe you're both doing
Al Gore invented it.
Al Gore invented that. So it was going to be the town square. It was going to connect us. It was going to supersede representative democracy, which is an old-fashioned phrase that I still believe in because I'm so old-fashioned. So, given what's happening today, and how false prophets brought us along, why should we believe it?
Well, because the message is not about moving fast or breaking things or replacing humans. Right? All the book is trying to do is just connecting humans together, which was, in a sense, the original internet vision before the dot-coms took it, right? The internet was to be a inter-network where like labs and universities and things like that run their own show, and through just very improper protocols like email, which is used today, can decouple this monopoly by everybody coming up with better ways to read or write emails.
But it was still going to be, elite interaction. Think tanks, super smart people at universities, tall foreheads. Now it's everybody connected.
Yes,
For better or for
here
worse.
comes everybody. Yes. And so, but with the book, I think it's not about asking you to believe in anything, right? It is about like contributing to Wikipedia or things like that. If you just press edit on one of those typos that you spotted and things like that, that's practicing democracy in a way that goes about it. So I don't think this is about prophesizing anything. This is our attempt at answering why Taiwan managed to counter the information pandemic without any administrative takedowns over the past 8 years, or how we countered the pandemic without any domestic lockdowns. People moved between cities throughout 3 years. And that is because it is within everyone's mind that they can co-create new solutions to new emerging conflicts. And the book is trying to explain this without resorting to Taiwanese exceptionalism or whatever tropes that people make on Taiwan, but rather just distilling a toolbox that we actually use.
Hillary, why do you remain optimistic about the ability of democracy to harness technology when so many other people are worried about it? Surveillance capitalism, surveillance governance as well.
For better or for worse, like democracy, this technology, the ecosystem of apps that we use every single day, it is unfortunately, maybe for better or for worse, foundational now, a similar way that democracy is. And if you want to participate, if you want to get anything out of it, you have to understand it. So there's sort of the citizen resident side of things, which is how to figure out how to participate and show up. There is the government side, which, you know, I have kind of dedicated my career to, which is to help government show up in the 21st century. You know, again, with governments have come a long way. They've been online now for decades, but the turn of the screw that has happened over the last 10 years is to be thinking about that switch from, we can't just put it online and assume it's going to work, but how do we make it work for me, for you, for everyone else, and for the people in the back office who are having to think about it. So, you know, again, it's sort of the participation piece and how do you show up to that. On the government side, it has to be, how are we always interrogating if this thing works for the people who need to use it?
The criticism against regulators and the criticism against critics too is that they are always reacting kind of reflexively to the march of technology and the potential peril and the scare stories that we read in the big bad media. And so I guess the question is, well, let me take it to a concrete example, so to speak, that is a little bit retro, but I'm going to raise it in a Toronto audience. Both of you know a little bit about something called smart cities and sidewalk labs and the experiment that was going to take place here in Toronto. Hillary, you were around in your job when that was happening, and Audrey Tang, he was looking at it. So I was almost on both sides of the fence on that issue. I understood the concerns about data trust and who controls the data. I also saw potentially an opportunity for Toronto to be cutting edge on this. What did you think when you saw this? Tell the truth. And what do you think in retrospect? What lessons learned? Just quickly, because it's an old story, it's a footnote in history, but it is at the intersection of trust, technology, and democracy.
Yeah, it really is. I think smart citizens make smart cities. And any effort that makes the citizens smart runs the possibility for those citizens to just fork whatever that company has to offer because they're smart, right? They can run their own versions of it. And it's this forkability that I think Sidewalk Labs they intended to explain some of that, like people can co-create their own norms, own codes, and things like that. But they didn't start it in such a way that to make the civil society organizations set the agenda. But rather, it's like, you know, I prepare a project on GitHub, it's already 99% done, and then I email you to move it. And it's, I guess it's open source technically, but it's co-creation, maybe not, right? So I think a lot of it stems from the willingness to embarrass yourself when you're just 1% there, 2% there. And then to just open source it like we did with the book when all we had was the table of content and nothing else, right? And that actually begets trust.
So you not only have to pre-bump, but pre-consult.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, it remains a missed opportunity. Not for the reasons that maybe you would expect. Sure, it would be neat to have a community downtown that is, you know, with a trash bins are running automatically on the street, et cetera. But what I mean, and I really appreciate all of the consultation that happened. I appreciate and understand the way that things fell out. The missed opportunity to me is that it could have been an incredible forcing function for the province to actually have to think about the basics of what we're going to enable that. So data trust, data in general, all of those things that my team was starting to get, you know, excited about. Okay, we've got to be thinking about data trust framework. We've got to be thinking about how do we push people to really understand what open data looks like, so that this can, you know, this can promulgate. So that's the missed opportunity to me. Is actually the cool side effect would have been having this really neat neighborhood, but the longevity of those foundational, fundamental pieces working inside government would have been pretty incredible.
So that's a good segue. One last question for me, and then I'll try to open it up. Audrey, you sort of pioneered this idea of alignment assemblies. Yeah, I know you love the term. It sounds a little Orwellian to me because it sounds like you will be aligned, but I don't. That's not the purpose. I'm just teasing here. So if I gave it away that I'm kind of hung up on representative democracy, where you elect people that you trust and you sort of delegate them to make decisions for you because life is complex. They can dive into the complexity. You two are far more idealistic than me. You think everybody can be an expert. And I'm not an elitist, but I am, as I said, a Democrat. So I think if I understand correctly, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, so these alignment assemblies are a chance to kind of hash it out in a way that Sidewalk Labs maybe didn't in its day. I'm a huge believer in crowdsourcing. People always catch up my mistakes, and I hopefully can correct them before the print run starts. Does anyone here know what a print newspaper is?
It's rich journalists.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I believe in crowdsourcing, but it's a tipping service. It's not always right. Sometimes it's wrong. And sometimes Wikipedia is a great tipping service. Sometimes it's wrong. My kids were taught in high school. So when you delegate all this authority to participants in alignment assemblies, just like what we used to call in Canada constituent assemblies, where people with you're both foreign born. Constituent assemblies, Meech Lake Constitution, people in this audience might remember that. And it's like a jury. Everyone comes together and has a consensus, but people who weren't in the room think, what? How did you get there? Right? Like the Sidewalk Labs. So tell us, how does it work?
And like with Sidewalk Labs, I think the problem was that it's not very easy to form it, right, for constitutions. But fortunately for AI, so alignment assemblies is trying to solve the alignment problem of AI, meaning that the AI, which is this large, very compressed version of the data, whatever that is scraped off the internet with copyrights, often contains biases and things that you probably don't want it to inflict on the social norms. That's the basic idea. Alignment assemblies is simply just a random, like 1,000 people in a jurisdiction, or in Taiwan's case, we send SMS to 200,000 people, like random numbers from the official 111, that's the official SMS number. And anybody can take a survey and say what they want the AI to behave, essentially. And then out of it, a microcosm of 450 people are chosen, represents the jury, right? And then they do this online video call with the AI facilitating service that ends up with a constitutional document on how they want AI to behave. And then we train the Taiwan trustworthy AI engine, the Taiwan model, constitutionally on that co-created document. So the resulting language model behaves in a way that respects the community norms. And the great thing about this is that it's portable. So people in Taipei, people in Tainan, these are different cities. They can just run a face-to-face assembly right after this and say, but in Tainan, we want this instead, and use that to then retune that open source AI model so that it now more fits their local norms. There's a company called Anthropic that used the same thing to train the Claude 3 Opus, their latest model, with a representative statistically like 1,000 US citizens. And so the original constitution that Anthropic wrote did not, for example, have clauses for people with alternate abilities, handicap people, and things like that. And they did this comparison that this crowdsourced constitution results in a model that's equally capable, but far less discriminatory, because it's much more nuanced and in line with people's lived experience. So that's their own story. But the point to your question is that everybody can afford it, and that's how it's different from traditional constitutional juries.
So you were able to correct for the lack of representation of people, but as I understand it, this is not a representative sample, it's more of a random sample. You shoot out this cascade of SMS sortition. Yeah. So there is that.
But is it also hyper-local?
It can also be hyperlocal.
That's
So
what's
it could be,
fascinating about it.
so it could be like this room, right? We run a POLIS conversation, we run a remesh conversation, we take the resulting matrix into a Google Doc, that's our constitution, and then we co-edit it until it synthetically checks, and then we train Llama or whatever model so that we now have a model that everybody here can live with.
What do you do about the silent majority who don't sign up?
If they don't sign up yet, right, then we expect that because the toolkit is open, if they find the title doesn't work to their liking, they and their people in their company or whatever, when they deploy that AI model internally, they can just train a LoRa, which is a very geeky way of saying an extension, right, to that previous align model. So everybody can align it further when and whenever they feel like it. Familiar with that sound, Ontario? You weren't expecting that one. That's a
I wasn't expecting that, but I mean, in terms of what it's selling Ontario, I do think there isn't. What's very interesting to me about this is that ability to say, okay, governance we probably need to iterate on governance just in general. And what Audrey's talking about allows you to say, okay, here's the heart of this model. Here is the basic constitution, but what works in Guelph might not work in Ottawa. And that's the point, because you can take that and you can let that community, work it, to use that language, and build something there in that community that works for them. And I do think that piece of it, that mentality and that approach would certainly sell it okay.
It's crowdsourcing, not sort of referendum, right? You mentioned Guelph, and that's of course where Mike Schreiner, that's the constituency of Mike Schreiner. I think there's a Kansas soulmate connection here. So I'm going to go to a question, crowdsourcing as a word, from Alejandra. I knew you were going to rank. I believe in the ranked ballot, so I'm okay with that. But what's the university? What's the population? Okay, what strategies should government adopt to regulate the use of AI in elections to safeguard the integrity of democratic process?
So in Taiwan, what we have seen is that deep fakes and especially voice cloning is used a lot nowadays. And even like outside of the election context, even just for transnational fraud, it is now very easy to just have an advertisement pretending to be a celebrity. If you click it, it starts a real-time WhatsApp conversation that can actually go voice. And that celebrity actually talks to you in very low latency in the actually processing of that celebrity. So this is reality now. This is not a future.
It's almost like AI phishing.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's spear phishing in the age of AI. So I think to counter that, it is no longer possible to tell whether it's synthetic or not from content alone. So from the actor behavior content layer, the content layer is gone. And although you can tell a little bit like, inauthentic behavior, posting advertisements on, the same seconds and so on, we're increasingly losing that line of defense as well, because they can convincingly create a life story of that fake person, right? So in Taiwan, we're going back to the basics, to the actor level. So already in Taiwan, to post a investment-related advertisement, you have to digitally sign or otherwise do a very strong KYC that you're a human. And if the platforms do not verify it and somebody gets conned for $1 million NT, then the platform is liable to that $1 million, which means Meta has been very cooperative with this. And you've had better luck than us with Meta. Well, liability schemes. So liability schemes and very strong KYC, I think that's the answer to the deepfakes and election.
Hillary, thoughts on that, and a follow-up question for both of you. What do you think about electronic balloting? Go ahead, Hillary.
Well, just quickly on deepfakes, what I think, again, this is my stone, but we have to go back to the basics and enable the government or any entity to very quickly communicate. And what does that mean? You have to have resilient websites and services and the ability to get information out quickly. So you have to have the basics done. But your last part of the question was electronic balloting. I think once we solve the knot of federated identity, that should be one of the first things that gets done.
Audrey? Well, if the ballot is to participate through budgeting or like e-petitions or counter signatures to referenda, which are all the system Taiwan already does, that's fine. But if it is exponential in the sense that it's a ballot to choose the president or the MPs, then it creates this exponential capture incentive, which is why we don't use electronic balloting for that. We use paper only, but we use electronic dimension, YouTube live streaming or whatever of the counting process, simply because we don't want to create an incentive. We're capturing it once, we capture it forever.
We deal with and worry about ransomware, like everyone around the world, at Toronto, Hamilton, at the zoo, hospitals, our library have all been captured, targeted. How do you deal with cyber warfare, if that's the right word, from the mainland China, the PRC?
So basically, we assume breach, meaning that we think that each and every system probably is already breached, but not at once. So when I sign an official document or when I prove myself as a real human to post advertisement, first PW FIDO, which is this biometric thing, checks on my device only, my biometric. CrowdStrike, another piece of software, checks PW FIDO. Cloudflare, another piece of software, checks the online activities and so on. The theory is that it's very difficult for an adversary to simultaneously penetrate three unrelated private sector suppliers. But have we gone with this just one single vendor, which will not use an interoperable open protocol, which uses proprietary stack, then of course all the cheeses are broken at a very same time. So just strengths in plurality, that's our defense strategy.
Redundancy.
Yeah, also avoiding vendor lock-in. So yeah, also.
So this is probably a good time to ask about disinformation, things, lack of information, something I worry about. You like coining phrases. You're a poet, so you talk about the infodemic during the pandemic,
or the information manipulation. Yes.
and you've also talked about. So tell us what's your playbook for. You talked a little bit about your playbook for the People's Republic of China. What was your playbook for your own people during the pandemic? Question for both of you.
Okay.
You're on a roll.
Okay. So as I mentioned, the idea is to depolarize people and to anticipate potential polarization points. For example, we knew that in the very beginning, there's going to be a mask and a mask thing going, which Canada probably doesn't have, but in Taiwan we have. And so,
You had the crowdsourcing, there were a few chuckles. There was a bit of that here too.
Okay, right. So, we framed the issue not around like N95, efficacy or whatever, but rather just had a very cute doll, Shiba Inu, with a poster with a paw in its hand, on its face, and that says, "Wear a mask to protect your own face against your dirty and washed hands." And that's that humor over rumor thing really worked because it caused a new cross-cutting conflict. It links hand washing and mask use. And it makes mask not something that you protect others, but rather just to protect your own face against your dirty hands. So it's so intuitive that it just diffused the polarization. And later on, we anticipate there will be a vax, anti-vax polarization, which you don't have, obviously. And so in Taiwan, again, we turned that into a friendly competition, right? We publish every day how many people in which age bracket prefers AstraZeneca or prefers Moderna or BNP or the homegrown Medigen. I got all four just to make a point. And so it turned. I do believe in redundancy. Right, exactly. Plurality, right? In vaccines. So there are people who like really hate Medigen and think it's water or worse, but there's no anti-vax section because we turned that into a friendly competition again, creating a cross-cutting conflict.
Well, our playbook on the digital side was, I think, basically twofold. One was to ensure that both the public and decision makers had all the data that they needed every single day. And that was a communication effort. It was also just a data gathering effort. We built the dashboard that the premier and the secretary use every single day to sort of understand where we were at in the province. So one was just about data visibility and transparency. The second was, and I don't know if anybody in the government at this point would say it this way, but what I think, if I were to distill it down into a phrase, what we were able to do was to make folks realize that policy and delivery had to be joined at the hip, and that because this was one of the very first times, in modern history that policy was iterating as fast as you would expect a product to iterate. And so having those two sides and those teams joined at the hip, so that as we were learning new information every day about where the public policy needed to go and where public health was going, we could adapt our products and our services and the information that we're providing to the public. So that was, I think, really transformational. I hope that there are other opportunities to prove that that policy delivery gap can be closed when we're not in a capital C crisis.
And you came up with the dashboard, which allows you to pivot faster, both publicly and in terms of policy, right?
I think that's right. Yeah.
I have a question here from Hamish asking, saying the internet is important for participation in society. Social media is harmful to society, especially the health of kids. What role should government play in mediating this? Hillary, you first. Give Audrey a chance to think this up.
Yeah, well, I think in general, there is a need for, I'll use the word regulation, but I don't know that I necessarily mean capital R regulation. And what I mean by that is, I think that government needs to be thinking about whether it's AI or other sort of tech policy issues that have to be on the forefront of understanding what the issues are, understanding what the technology does, understanding what the potential of the technology is, so that they can create guardrails. And those guardrails are then the first step toward, okay, let's test this. We can test it internally, but we can also test it with companies. We can test it publicly. Those guardrails that, you know, they start to set the landscape of then what may need to become regulation. And we've done that in Ontario with AI. We have, you know, a trustworthy AI framework the government's been working on for the last couple of years to do exactly that, and to sort of say these are the principles and the values that we believe in with regard to this technology. So no AI in secret. You know, AI shouldn't be making final determinations. That has to be a human. Those kinds of things that don't necessarily need to be capital R regulations yet, but they need to be setting a framework for folks to understand how we're going to be better understanding the technology.
Guardrails. In Taiwan, we're basically doing crowdsourced horizon scanning for all the harms that the social media is causing, right? So by running alignment assemblies, it's not just to tune the AIs, it's also asking people in terms of information integrity. What are the harms you're already seeing? Is it non-consensual intimate images? Is it investment scams or other sort of scams? Is it deep faking of campaigners or whatever of elections and so on? And so for each and every one that was identified this way, we amend the relevant act. So it's not a fundamental digital service act, but just in the relevant act, we say for this kind of things, if the internet platforms do not adopt these norms co-created by the people, then they become liable for the damage. So this is the way we've been doing for the past like 7 years. I would argue that a good way for this approach to continue is for people to co-create alternatives that are pro-social media. In Taiwan, there are people who uses threads.net, which is this new meta thing, but it's now part of the Fediverse, meaning that you can create new viewers, new apps or whatever on the threads.net. So you're not tied to whatever addiction making UI that is currently doing. And so as long as we decouple the user experiences and the core services that those platforms are using, when we move to an email or podcast or open interoperable system where the market forces can actually, you know, make a network effect on the civil society side, not just on the large platform side.
Fascinating. All right, we're going to go to a network effect question here, but it's a hybrid because it's asked by somebody who I recognize in the room today. So John Ryerson, I would hand you the microphone, but it's just too much movement. So I'm going to read out, I'm going to put words in your mouth, read your question out, John. Big issues like climate change or housing are long-term. That's to say, not just governing only to the next election. Do governments need shorter-term?
Well, I mean, for each harm, there are the chronic parts like social media addiction and the acute ones, which are the kinds that we just mentioned. And of course, wins on those acute ones begets trust across different ideologies and so on, that then carry to long-term horizon scanning things. In Taiwan, we have the presidential hackathon for the short-term wins, where people can take a small district or city project, data literacy, air pollution monitoring, or whatever, that solves a acute problem. But the top 5 winning teams, they don't get money. They get a trophy in the form of a projector. When you turn on, it projects the president giving you the trophy. So very meta, representing the promise that whatever you did locally will become public digital infrastructure nationally in the next fiscal year or two. And so that solves the scalability problem, the bootstrapping problem for digital public infrastructure. And so that can then be used to solve the chronic problems.
Well, the nice thing about short-term wins is that it actually gives the people on the ground that are going to span administrations. It builds confidence and resilience in what they have built and what they can understand, so that even if mandates shift, they can understand. They can sort of have the sort of the basics in place to keep certain things going. In my mind, that's the real win around sort of a short-term progression. It's just giving the team and the bureaucrats the understanding of what has worked and what hasn't worked, so that even if mandates shift a little bit, you have that history.
Not just the teams and the bureaucrats, but the politicians also benefit from short-term successes, and arguably, although this still remains controversial in this town, our premier, Doug Ford, benefited from a perceived competence, more or less, on COVID that he didn't have before, or perhaps after. So in that sense, this segues me to another question. Hillary, you were appointed when Premier Kathleen Wynne was premier, and you served Premier Doug Ford. There will be a follow-up for you as well, Audrey, and that is just, what is it like dealing with politicians? I don't mean that question in the conventional sense. It's just that there seems like, in Canada we say there's 2 solitudes, French and English. Now it's many solitudes, but you could argue that there are 2 solitudes in technology and democracy. There is this perception that politicians and some voters are Luddites, and that the tech folks are the cutting edge cool kids like you two who are seeing around corners while we're looking over our shoulders. So there does seem to be this perception of 2 solitudes. Audrey, what was it like dealing with 2 different governments and the 2 solitudes of the tech team and the political risk averse leadership that was elected? Sorry, I said Audrey, but I wanted to go to Hillary first, because I was going to try to torture her first.
So yes, I joined the public service in 2017. Got to work with amazing people like Andre, and then there was an administration change. I will say I don't know if people expected me to last through that. I mean, I don't know what the word on the street was, but honestly, that sort of administration change, it didn't. We didn't feel it at all in a really wonderful way. And I say that because, the new government came in and really wanted to think about what it meant to deliver good services to people. And so our team, I think, had a bit of a boost throughout the early days, and certainly when the pandemic hit, because we were one of the only teams that was structured and situated in a way that could pivot on a dime and say, what do we have to do, and how do we get it out the door in 3 days? And so we started delivering websites, services, the symptom checker apps, just pivoted on a dime, and we're able to do that. So, in terms of what's it like to go through that, we didn't feel it too much, because, and I will confess, I didn't feel it too much in terms of being, the shit umbrella for the team. I hope the team didn't feel it, but I also didn't as well. It was just like, let's keep going, because it is important to think about evolution and iteration and efficiency, and the work that teams like the teams that I've had the privilege to lead, the work that those teams do is all about making things simpler. And whether you use language that appeals to right, left, or center, it is the same work of making government better and getting your mandate delivered, because that's going to incentivize people to show up and vote again. So again, it's all a virtuous circle.
A virtuous circle. I saw that coming. And the government this conservative government was rewarded for its faith in you, and that you were able to help them look good and do good, because at the end of the day, good government is good politics, and good service delivery or bad service delivery is just bad for everybody. Remember the passport delays that we were facing a couple of years ago. People couldn't get their passports renewed post-pandemic. Audrey, you who are not just an anarchist, but conservative anarchists, correct? And so what's it like dealing with political parties in power?
Part of the conservative is just to respect traditions, to make sure that the existing institutions views that we're helping the helpers, not replacing the helpers. The faith sentence and so on. Taiwan, I think, is the second most diverse religiously place on earth, and with more than 70% voter turnout and so on. That means that whatever policies we make need to be respectful to all these traditions and conserve them. And also to respect their ability to do direct action, which is the anarchist part. And so I think my point being, if we make sure that digital is there to serve plurality, and in Mandarin, conveniently, digital and plural is the same word. So when you say 数位部长, it means both plural ministers and digital ministers. And so by saying that digital and plurality is the same thing, anything we do is just a beginning, an invitation, so that people speaking indigenous languages, Chinese sign languages, whatever ethnicity, Taoist, whatever, can forfeit and to make better services that serves their constituencies. And so to take that is to mean that people who are Luddites or whatever, they actually prefer technology to be delivered in a particular way. It's not that they refuse technology, it's that we respect technologies that work with them, not just for them. And so by making it workable, I think you can have both sides. You can have very avant-garde, language models, whatever, but in the same vein to making sure that it serves all the 20 national languages.
You may know that our current government in Ontario calls itself progressive conservative, and I think conservative anarchist feels like it's the same kind of duality that is suspicious. But Hillary, I forgot to mention that part of the when the new government came to power, and you worked the Treasury Board, and Peter Bethlen-Falvey, who was then a minister, now our finance minister, and there was a hunt to find every fax machine still in government. Did you get them all, or did some get away?
It's interesting. There are still a few in place that were very necessary for certain services. I think especially in the healthcare
Redundancy
realm, but redundancy is good. But we, for the most part, asked the facts.
Okay. TikTok. If I understand it, you are in the process of or have already banned
4 years ago.
Yeah, banned TikTok. Was that controversial? Did you get alignment in your alignment assemblies? And what do young people say about that?
Well, in Taiwan, we 4 years ago classified TikTok as a harmful product, meaning that it is under indirect control of our foreign adversary. There's this formal definition. And a harmful product cannot be used in the public sector. And after Speaker Pelosi visited us 2022, we saw that it's not enough to just restrict it in public sector networks, because there was this signboard in the commercial sector but housed within the Taiwan rail station, and that was replaced by hate messages, partly because it came from a PRC vendor, right? But it's not plugged into the government service network, so it's I guess not government service, but it looked like government service. And when a journalist wanted to check whether it was entire translation was hacked or whatever, they find the ministry's website very slow to respond. That's a DDoS attack. So we faced this compound attacks during that time, and so we had to extend the amount to restrict harmful products. So now in public places like public schools and things like that, which covers all the basic education and so on, there's no TikTok connectivity.
Was there pushback from young people?
In a sense, no, because we started early enough. So the penetration rate of TikTok at that time was quite low. And even though, like, I think by now, I think a quarter of our people have had TikTok installed on their phone. Only about 3%, 4% use it as their primary platform. So the pushback is slightly lower than compared to, say, the US.
And Hillary's not asking, but if I were to ask on her behalf, would you advise her, if she was still our Chief Digital Services Officer, to extend, because now Ontario and Canada prevent public officials from having TikTok on their phones, and some politicians were annoyed by this. What about the rest of us? Your advice to Hillary, and then we'll see what Hillary.
So not just public schools.
No, should it be extended?
Okay. Yeah. Well, we're having a conversation now in Taiwan as part of our alignment assemblies on information security, whether we should extend even beyond public schools, like public transportation places and things like that. So I don't think there's currently appetite for a kind of outright ban, because one possible solution is for TikTok to prove that they can set up a local shop like Zoom is committed to by the end of this year, so that we can audit all its inbound and outbound data flows. And then it's forced to them to prove that they're not under indirect control of foreign adversary, which is the same thing as the US Act is asking to do. So I think this piecemeal thing makes more sense because it scales and generalizes to other PRC de facto controlled applications or once de facto control like Zoom, but hopefully no.
And before we torture Hillary, you talked about, you framed it in terms of a national adversary. What about the algorithm and the adverse effects of the algorithm on kids?
Well, I think that's another issue altogether, right? For algorithmic accountability stuff, I think the consensus from our previous aligned assembly is simply so that it needs to be opened up, like Rectangle. Well, that example is closing down, but anyway, something like the publicly scrutinable API on its downstream effects. And I think if we can do alignment assemblies like literally every week, then actually the downstream effects and the adjustments can be shown, and it's not just correlation, there could be causation.
Hillary, are you on TikTok?
No. My kids got into TikTok. I have a 9-year-old and a 14-year-old, and my kids got into TikTok for a hot minute, but then YouTube brought in YouTube Shorts, and I kind of replaced it. So as a parent, with my parent hat on only, very supportive of how we think about restricting access to some of that type of content, especially in schools. And, I've been trying for unsuccessly yet, but to block YouTube in my own home. I downloaded some tools and had it figured out, and my kids they rebelled. But I do think that, just as a parent, and the question you just asked, in terms of the algorithm, the tools that those companies are using to understand us better than we know ourselves, is very scary as a parent.
Very quick last question, 20 seconds each. What do you do about Twitter, X, other kinds of hate and abuse and trolling?
X has this thing called community events, which is community moderation. The beauty is that it's open source and it works as a layer across all possible social media platforms technically. So potentially we can extend that model to also cover threads.net or whatever thing, and then just build a collaborative check network of all sort of online harms. And in Taiwan, we already do some of that. It's called co-facts or collaborative fact checking. And I suggest you to check it out.
Get any hate?
Sorry?
Did you get any hate?
Oh, did I get any hate? Oh, sure. But I think, honestly, one of the main reasons is because of my handle on Twitter, which is Hillary. I have pretty much abandoned using it. And one of the reasons is because everybody just yells at me, assuming I'm Hillary Clinton.
So you have an experiment, an actual real-time experiment using Hillary Clinton's presumed handle. Okay, we're out of time for questions. We're out of time, period. I just wanted to conclude by saying how easy it is to be pessimistic about technology and democracy's future, but pessimism is not a strategy. So we need an alternative, and for that, we look to you too. I'm going to turn it over to Karine Bardisi, the Executive Director of the DAIS, for a formal thanks momentarily. Is Karine lurking? I don't see you. Where's Karine? There you are. Your position right in front of me. But first, as promised, a reminder that Audrey has a new book coming out called Plurality, the Future of Collaborative Technology and Democracy. And appropriately for Audrey, it is available for download. It's open source. Just go to plurality.net. Is that right? Okay. I'm going to sneak in a quick informal thanks to both of our guests. Sheshiat, thank you. Merci, English, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Martin. I I think the way forward in so much of these issues is having leaders who have both expertise and empathy. And I'm just so thrilled that we were able to welcome you to the Democracy Forum in 2 days today. So thank you so much, Audrey, for making this trip, and for Hillary for being the friend of the days as well. Thanks. The Deus team that helped put on this event. Thank the Deus team that helped put on this event. Viet Vu, Angus Lockhart, Tanya Coyle, Catherine Embergy, Andre Cote, Sam Andre. Am I leaving anyone out? Who's here? No. And thanks to all of you. We have for participating in this democracy forum. We've got some exciting events coming up on the theme of democracy in just 1 week and 7 days, 168 plus 4 or 5 hours. Wonk Prom is going to be launching a democracy exchange. It's also the official after party of the Public Policy Forum's testimonial dinner. Wonkprom.com. Please get your tickets for Canada's best dance party celebrating politics, public policy, and people who make change happen. That's on Thursday, and then on Friday and Saturday we're co-hosting with OCAD University and the Open Democracy Project, Democracy Exchange, Canada's Democracy Summit. Tickets start at $25. Participatory workshops, speakers, panels, artistic installations. It's really the whole 9 yards. And democracy, we try to keep it affordable. Thanks to our sponsors, we're able to have tickets starting at $25. It's also streaming online. Thanks so much again. Maybe because the mic did not pick it up fully, I just want to thank again Martin for your devotion to the building better democracy through the Deus and TMU, and again to Audrey and Hillary for leading with such empathy and expertise. And as a final note for those in the audience here today, I believe Audrey is going to be able to sign a few cover pages of the book. So we'll do that at the desk over there. And thanks so much to all of you, and happy Eclipse watching safely in the meantime.